Everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be going over the story of Peter Pan. Now, I know there are a lot of versions of this. We're going to be going over the 1953 version, back when I think Disney probably had its best run of coming out with great moral stories, at least ones that we can get lessons from. So, hope you stick with me while we unpack this. So, I got a little bit more art here. I keep getting my lefts and rights confused because it's not mirrored in the camera. Anyway, my wife painted that one. I just stuck it to the backboard there, so I figured it was kind of fitting. I'm going to go shopping for some other art because every time I try to put something framed up here, the glare is just a little bit too much, at least for the setup that I got. But anyway, we're going to talk about Peter Pan, so the 1953 version. What we're going to do is we're going to go over the story for a little bit first, and once we go over the story, then we're going to unpack the characters and hopefully get the moral of this story, what calls out to you and me, and what made that movie such a great hit back in 1953, and even still today. And I really think this is a good lesson for boys and girls, young ones, with the explanation behind it. And I'll get into that a little bit as well as we progress. So the story goes something like this. Wendy and her two brothers are having stories read to them about Peter Pan and his adventures fighting Captain Hook. They fall asleep, they wake up in the middle of the night, and they find a shadow that looks like Peter Pan's, and Peter Pan chasing his shadow and trying to capture it. And he does capture it, but he tries to put it on with soap, so he has no idea what he's doing. He invites them to Neverland, and the way they get to Neverland is by pixie dust and thinking happy thoughts. They get to the realm of Neverland. So they go to Neverland. The Indians and the Lost Boys are discovered there as well, but Captain Hook, who's like the only strong male character in the whole movie, besides maybe like the parents in the beginning and the end, is like a tyrant, and he captures Tiger Lily, that's her name. He captures the Indian princess, and so Peter Pan rescues her. And eventually, Captain Hook captures Wendy and her brothers and the Lost Boys and gives them a choice. The pen, you join my crew, or the plank, and you get to shove off. And so Wendy goes first and chooses the plank. She's like the eldest, and she's like a motherly figure to them. She jumps off the plank of Captain Hook's boat. Peter Pan rescues her, fights Captain Hook, who's being chased constantly by this crocodile who's eaten a clock, so it's like the dragon of time. He gets cast into the river, and then they take them back. They take them back to London, where they were before. Now, in the next movie, Peter Pan does come back and I guess visits Wendy's daughter. So Wendy is old and aged. So that's like the brief snippet of it. I'm going to assume you have an idea of what the Peter Pan story is, so I'm not going to go too much more into detail. What I want to do is unpack the characters and unpack the moral of the story and why it's either good or bad. And I think it's mostly good, but it's one of those things that, like, you need a mature hand to kind of guide the thinking in this movie. So I don't know about you guys, but I really like watching movies with my kids. Everything. And so that way, especially nowadays where they want to push agendas rather than virtues into fiction, because fiction is just that. It's fantasy. It's meant to be exploratory reality, something like that. So when you push confusion as opposed to trying to establish identities and how to live from your identity outward, well, you don't even have a base. You don't have a point of reference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Peter Pan, and I'm going to have to jump around a bit because all these characters' stories are intermingled, and the reason why this is so interesting to us, and it calls to us, and you can watch it and focus on it, is because we emulate a lot of these stories. So Peter Pan is young. He's forever young. You never grow up in Neverland, ever, which is why he is also the same age when he visits Wendy's daughter later on in the second movie, I guess. I guess it's the second movie. But he lost his shadow, and he's trying to reattach himself to it. That's significant, and especially if you look into Carl Jung, the concept of the shadow, your dark side, Peter Pan is constantly in Neverland. He's the king of Neverland, and he has, like, Tinkerbell, his fairy of fantasy. He can never have her. She's so insignificant to him, she's just glamour. There's also, like, mermaids later on in the story, which are the same exact thing. They're beautiful, sure, but they're not compatible. Mermaids and humans are just not compatible, and I don't think I have to go too deep into that. The shadow is kind of like the darker side of a person. And why is it important that you're attached to that? Well, you have to understand it, and that's also in the story of Cain and Abel. So, if you're not familiar with the story of Cain and Abel, there came a time when Abel and Cain were to offer sacrifices to God. Abel offered lamb, and Cain offered grapes. And Abel was viewed as having the better sacrifice. Cain got mad, like very mad, and God said, "Why is your countenance fallen?" Behold, sin crouches at the door, but you must master it. And that's like the shadow, and you have to master it. But instead, he killed his brother because he was so envious about the blessings that he received, and he didn't want to master the darkness. And so, if you don't master the darkness, if you don't understand what you are capable of, then it will overtake you, and it will come out in ways that you cannot control because you're choosing not to control it. You're choosing not to understand it. You're choosing not to be a part of it. And so, a person who's constantly in a fantasy world where you can fly, nobody ever dies, well, you're not really attached to your shadow. So what's going to happen? Well, reality is going to catch up with you because people do grow old and die. Peter Pan is a fictional character, obviously. So you can stay this level of maturity, like a childlike maturity, and still be like 40 or 50 years old, never grown up and never taken accountability, responsibility, or duty that you have to reality itself to keep reality continuing. So him not being attached to his shadow, that's extremely significant. And Wendy knew he was trying to attach himself to his shadow because that's like the glamour of attraction to young women. Men can fake competence. And that's kind of like what Peter Pan does the entire way in Neverland. You can't lose. He's in a game he can't lose. And if you're in a game you can't lose, what's the danger in it? And so he's the hero of fantasy per se. And he's attractive right there. But she realizes, which is one of the reasons why I think Wendy wants to go back to London, she realizes that that's not reality. You have to grow up. You can't have kids unless you choose to grow up. But Peter Pan is infatuated by Wendy because she is like agency. She finds him interesting, and he finds her interesting because she finds him interesting and vice versa. She is great character. She's an essential feminine. She reads to the Lost Boys. She she really cares about them, and they need a motherly figure. And this is psychologically proven. Like, children can survive with the mother. But if the mother's gone out of the picture and it's like a single dad, their psychological development will be extremely hampered. The essence of character, your identity, is found in your mother's eyes. She looks at you because women are wired to be connected with the infant, with the innocent. She looks at you and you get your meaning from her. That's where we all get our identity in our meaning as we grow up. We get it through our mother's eyes, through beauty itself looking at us. One of the key moments for Wendy is when she is given the choice by Captain Hook to walk the plank. And he's like, do you want to join the crew? You could join the crew or walk the plank. Do you want to be tyrannical? Do you want to be controlling? You could be old like us and be powerful. Or, what are you going to sacrifice your identity for? She chooses the plank willingly. She even has a tear in her eye when she goes off and walks it. Because it is her duty as the eldest, since there's no father figure to protect the other children, she is the only thing in the way of the destruction of innocence. And that's Wendy. And she is a heck of a character, man. She's polite the entire way. She is extremely feminine, but she knows her duty, she knows her place, and she knows the place of the hero as well. It is Peter Pan's job to save her, but it's also Peter Pan's job to grow. And because he does not grow, he wants to stay in Neverland. She doesn't go back with him. She can't. She values duty and she values children. You cannot have more children unless you grow up. That's just a giant mark of maturity. Well, I guess you can in a physical sense, but would they really be your children or would they be Lost Boys because you're choosing also to never grow up? That's a giant mark of parenthood, accepting that identity of being somebody responsible for those who cannot take care of themselves. There is something interesting about the imagination, though. I mean, when Peter Pan invites them to Neverland, you can fly with pixie dust, so there's an element of mystery there, and you can fly if you think happy thoughts. Now, that's very interesting because happy thoughts are always fleeting. They're always temporary. You can't hold on to that forever. There's something about joy, which you can live your life with like an aim, with something greater than yourself that lifts you up. And then you can take the scars of life with joy. Sometimes you can take pain with joy because you know where you're going. You know your point of reference, you know your identity, and you know what you're trying to do. So that's Nietzsche's, whoever has a why can withstand any how, something like that. So that's like another mark of how temporary Neverland is. It's in the imagination. Think happy thoughts, you get to Neverland. The Lost Boys they're just an interesting crew. If you don't have a father figure, you gravitate toward what is nearest to you and what is apparently most competent. Now, because Captain Hook is so tyrannical and wants things done such a way, and that the Lost Boys are still in like this innocent, unformed phase, well, they definitely don't want that. That's like the epitome of structure. And there's death in that. Like, if you step outside Captain Hook's box, you are just dead. They will kill you. They'll shove you off the plank. So they gravitate toward Peter Pan because he's been doing this for a long time. He's the leader of the Lost Boys. But this is also like a kind of a snapshot framework of our current culture, where you have the dissection and dismantling of the current nuclear family unit, where you have the mother, the father, and the children. And it should be like that, and they should stay together and work their differences out. They should both grow and mature so their children can watch that template and grow up accordingly. Unfortunately, due to things like no-fault divorce, and out of all the commandments in the Bible, thou shalt not commit adultery is the only one in our culture, in our Western American culture, that doesn't have a penalty with it, besides for the male almost 100% of the time. Not all the time, but certain states definitely have it out more so for the man. It's assumed that it's the man's fault, and rightly so, because oftentimes the relationship goes like, the husband should love his wife. She's number one. Kids actually come second. You can't have kids without the template of a good, solid relationship. Because then what are they looking at? People that argue all the time? They're going to repeat that as they grow. And the flip side to that, the assumption is you love your wife. The masculine loves the feminine. She respects you, because the roles, as they are way back traditionally, is the man is the one that works hardest, works the most, is intentional, keeps the garden, tills the garden, goes and fights the monsters, and he might actually die in doing so. That's worthy of respect. There's danger outside of the garden, and you have to go get food. You know, that kind of thing. But you love the feminine. That's the other part of it too, and that's a part that's, as the feminine's desacralized in our Western culture, that kind of gets lost. Then we got Captain Hook. Captain Hook is just like, he's a person you just don't want to be. He already scarred by time, literally. So you have this alligator who might as well be a dragon, who ate a clock, so it's ticking constantly. So it's like the dragon of time, who already had a piece of Captain Hook, wants more of him. And that's what it looks like when you get older in Neverland. You lose a piece of yourself, and then whatever ate you wants to keep eating you. That's age. Like, who wants to be that? And Peter Pan takes a look at that. It's like, no thank you. Captain Hook is also at war with the ignorance of youth. So there's a Japanese proverb that goes something like, wisdom should always fear the strength of youth. And I think that's very important, because people can be so irrationally strong, it's almost ridiculous. This is like an adult temper tantrum. People getting mad because you cut them off in the street. You know, something like that. That's actually, per scriptures, that's more forgivable than not being passionate and then like willfully planning out killing your neighbor. You know, fist fighting is one thing. That's like being held by the passion of the immediate. That's more forgivable than cold-blooded murder. So there are other elements in here too. Like, Tinkerbell is extremely magical. She's beautiful. She's fantastic. She always follows Peter Pan around. She's always within arm's reach. She's like the fairy of porn. That's kind of what it is. It's like this illusion of lights that appeals to the image, that appeals to the visual. And that'll get guys, dude. Just having an image that compels you and you follow it and you just keep it with you all the time. I mean, we have that in our cell phones, to be honest. It's quite a heck of a trap. And that can blind you to what is authentically feminine. Like Wendy. Wendy was obviously more of a woman than Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell couldn't even talk. She just, rang little bells. She couldn't even communicate properly. Wendy could, and Wendy actually looked up to Peter Pan. She's like, you're a little bit taller than what I imagined you in the stories. So he was like the adventurous, masculine template for her, at least for a while, until they had to go back to reality, until the adventure was over. Well, what does a masculine look like when the adventure is over? Well, the answer to that is he stays with you. He should. He should be with you during the flower of youth, and because of his word, he should, and obviously Peter Pan didn't marry Wendy, because of his word, he should have that duty to be bound to you. Not only for you, but for all the Lost Boys that are going to come after. That's why it's so significant when it comes to marriage, the words and the language that's mixed into that. So what's the moral of the story? From what I can tell, to mature, to grow, one must accept your role in reality as it is. And you must be joined to your shadow, whatever that takes. Because that is your measurement with reality. We all die in the end. You can choose not to believe that and be a child who's still grown up an adult, who does not engage with the feminine, does not engage with reality, who does not engage with the masculine. You just want your life to be all drama forever. Never subject yourself to anything higher. But that's not part of reality, and even within ourselves, we have this constant pull and tug between what we know and what we actually do. That's like the war on the flesh. So I think this is a really good story of how not to act as a masculine and how to act properly as the feminine. It's really good. Wendy's just a solid character the entire movie. Peter Pan, I think at the end caps, that's where his fault is. In Neverland, he's obviously king. He does what he should do in the spirit of adventure. But he doesn't age, and he doesn't grow. And that's a problem. Because in the hero story, you have to subject yourself to something beyond normal. Peter Pan didn't really do that. He just he lost his shadow. Oh, I found it. And he went right back up. He went right back to his comfort zone. He didn't actually have authentic danger the entire time. To participate in the hero's journey, you need that authentic danger. And men crave danger and adventure. We need it. If you don't have it in your life, if you don't seek it, it's going to find you, whether you like it or not. If you want to explore a little bit more about this hero's journey, click this video up here that YouTube recommends. I'd appreciate it. We'll see how far this rabbit hole goes.